She was thrown from the wagon like spoiled cargo, her wrists bound, her lips cracked from thirst. The desert stretched endless, red clay, thorn brush, and a sky that seemed to mock her suffering. Her family's words still rang in her ears, useless, nothing but a burden. They hadn't even looked back as the wheels rolled on, leaving her in the dust like an unwanted dog. All through the night, coyotes circled, eyes glinting in the firelight of the dying sun. She could not move. Rope burned into her skin. Flies drank from the open sores along her arms. And when the stars came out, the cold wrapped her bones in cruel silence. She whispered one prayer, not for rescue, but for death to come quickly. But death did not come. Instead, boots crunched against gravel. A shadow loomed, a giant of a man, shoulders like carved rock, beard tangled, rifle slung over his back. A mountain man, a hermit. His name would later be known as Caleb, but to her, in that moment, he was something else. Terror. Friend or foe? Her cracked lips barely moved. Her voice was a broken reed. He knelt, eyes storm gray, unreadable. His knife gleamed in the moonlight as he slid it beneath the ropes. For a heartbeat, she thought he might finish what her kin had started. Instead, the cords snapped free. She collapsed against the dirt, shuddering, too weak to run, too scared to trust. Caleb said nothing, only laid his coat over her shoulders and poured a trickle of water against her lips. She coughed, half choking, but drank. Then he whispered, so low she almost thought she imagined it. You're not useless. Her chest burned with something she couldn't name. He carried her as if she weighed nothing, his boots sinking deep into the dust, his breath steady. With every step she wondered, what kind of man risks carrying another's shame into the mountains? At his cabin, rough-hewn logs crouched beneath the shadow of pines, he laid her on a cot. Firelight flickered across the scars on his arms, the loneliness carved into his face. He moved with silence, tending her wounds, stoking the flames, setting bread to warm. She closed her eyes, listening to the crackle of firewood. And for the first time since her family abandoned her, she wondered if survival was possible. But outside, in the valley below, a lone rider paused on a ridge, watching smoke rise from the hermit's cabin. Watching and waiting. Morning light spilled through the cracks of the cabin walls, painting thin stripes across the rough wooden floor. The girl stirred, her body aching, her lips still parched. For a moment, she thought the night had been a fever dream, that no one had cut her bonds, no one had carried her through the wilderness. But then she smelled wood smoke and bread, and she saw him. Caleb moved slowly across the room, pouring coffee into a tin cup, the steam curling into the cold mountain air. His shoulders filled the doorway, his silence filling the rest. He glanced at her once, and she quickly looked away, clutching the blanket around her thin frame. He set the cup near her. Drink. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. The bitter taste scalded her tongue, but it was warm. Real. She swallowed hard, forcing down the lump in her throat. Caleb went back to his chores without another word. She watched as he split logs with steady rhythm, hauled water from a barrel, and patched a hole in the roof. Each strike of the axe was final, like a man battling ghosts. His silence was not unkind. It was heavy, deliberate, as if he'd long forgotten how to speak to another soul. She tried to rise, but her legs betrayed her. She gasped and fell back against the cot, clutching her ribs. Caleb turned, frown creasing his weathered face. Without a word, he rummaged through a shelf and brought a small tin. He opened it, the smell of pine resin and herbs filling the room. Hold still, he said. His rough hands brushed against her skin as he dabbed ointment on her wounds. She flinched, but he steadied her with a gentleness she had never known. His touch was careful, almost reverent, as though afraid she might shatter. "Why help me?" she whispered. Caleb's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, with a gravelly voice, he muttered, "'Cause you were left to die. And I've seen too much death already." The words hung in the air. She wanted to ask more, but his gaze warned her not to. So she stayed silent, listening instead to the rhythm of the axe, the creak of the cabin, the whisper of wind in the pines. Yet beneath the quiet unease coiled in her chest. For all his kindness, she could not shake one thought. Was this mountain hermit her salvation? Or a crueler fate in gentler hands? Outside, far below, that same rider still lingered on the ridge. He wasn't alone anymore. Days passed in uneasy rhythm. The cabin grew warmer, the scent of pine and smoke clinging to her clothes. Slowly, strength returned to her limbs. She swept the floor, fetched kindling, and mended torn fabric with hands that shook less each day. Caleb never asked her to do these things, but he did not stop her either. One evening, as dusk painted the mountains in shades of blood and violet, she found her voice. Sitting near the fire, she pressed her palms together and spoke. "My name is Miriam." Caleb paused, mid-motion with his knife against a whetstone. His gray eyes lifted, studying her. She waited, heart racing, afraid he might dismiss her as he did most words. But he gave a slow nod, and the sound of the whetstone continued. The silence weighed on her until she broke again. "My family, they said I was worthless. Couldn't work like the others. Couldn't marry right. They sold me off to clear their debt." Her voice cracked, the flames casting shadows across her hollow face. "And when the man they sold me to found I wasn't strong enough to carry his loads, he tied me to that wagon and left me for the coyotes." Caleb's knife stopped. The fire popped. His gaze hardened in the firelight, not at her, but at the world that had done such a thing. "You're not worthless," he said, the same words he had spoken the night he found her. His voice was a low rumble, but it carried the weight of an oath. She looked at him, searching for the cruelty she'd been taught to expect from men. She found none, only loneliness carved deep, and scars that spoke of battles he never told. Yet even as she began to feel safe, attention pressed close. Caleb had been scanning the ridges more often, pausing in his chores to watch the tree line. His rifle leaned closer to the door now, his hand brushing the stock as if by instinct. Miriam noticed. "You expect someone?" He didn't answer. But when the hooves came, faint thunder rolling through the valley, her heart confirmed what his silence already said. Riders. From the window she saw them, dark figures weaving between pines. 6, maybe 7. Their coats dripping from the day's rain, their rifles catching the last of the light. One face she recognized even through distance, the man her family had sold her to. Her blood ran cold. "They've come for me." Caleb stood, rifle in hand, his eyes fixed on the door. "They'll find this mountain isn't theirs to claim." The storm rolled in quick, dragging a wall of thunder across the mountains. Lightning split the black sky, white veins crawling over the ridges. The riders reached the clearing as rain hammered the cabin roof, each drop drumming like a warning. Caleb stood at the window, rifle steady, eyes narrowed. Miriam crouched by the hearth, clutching the blanket tight around her trembling shoulders. She recognized him now, the man astride the lead horse, his crooked hat shadowing a face she prayed never to see again. Jonas, the one her family sold her to. His sneer had not changed. "Caleb!" Jonas's voice tore through the storm. "Send her out and I'll leave your hide intact. That girl's mine by right of trade." Miriam's breath broke. Mine. The word cut worse than the ropes ever had. She shook her head violently, whispering, "Please don't let him take me." Caleb's jaw tightened. His voice was a growl. "She ain't yours. She ain't anyone's but her own." Gunmetal glinted as Jonas raised his hand. His riders fanned out, rifles angled toward the cabin. Lightning flashed, casting their faces in monstrous light. Miriam's heart pounded. Caleb cocked his rifle, the sound sharp as thunder itself. The first shot cracked. Wood splintered from the door frame, showering Miriam with fragments. She gasped and pressed low. Caleb answered with fire of his own, a rider tumbling into the mud with a scream. The storm became chaos, gunfire echoing, hooves pounding, rain washing blood into the dirt. Smoke from Caleb's rifle filled the cabin, stinging Miriam's eyes. Still he stood tall, moving with precision, every shot measured, every breath steady. A shadow slipped through the back, one of Jonas's men, blade flashing in the lightning. Miriam saw it before Caleb did. She snatched a burning log from the hearth, swung with desperate strength, and the man howled, dropping the knife as fire kissed his sleeve. Caleb wheeled and dropped him with a single shot. "Stay low!" he barked, though his voice carried more fear for her than command. The battle stretched like a nightmare. Jonas, untouched, rode closer, firing round after round. His voice thundered, "You can't keep her, mountain rat! She was bought, and bought she'll remain." Then lightning struck a pine at the clearing's edge, the tree crashing between Jonas's men, splitting the earth with fire and smoke. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Rain hissed over burning branches. Jonas dismounted, eyes blazing with hatred, mud soaking his boots. He leveled his pistol at the cabin door. This ends now. And Caleb, drenched and unyielding, stepped outside to meet him. Rain poured like the heavens themselves had opened war against the earth. Caleb stepped into it, rifle gripped in his hands, his frame outlined in flashes of lightning. Jonas stood a dozen paces away, pistol raised, his men scattered and broken behind him. Miriam pressed her face against the cabin door frame, heart pounding, breath shallow. Every nerve screamed that Caleb could be lost in a single pull of a trigger. Jonas sneered through the storm. "You think you can play hero? She's nothing but wasted flesh. Her own kin knew it. That's why they sold her." Caleb's reply came low and certain. "Then they never saw what I see now." The words struck Miriam harder than the thunder rolling overhead. Tears blurred her vision, though she dared not look away. Jonas fired first. The muzzle flash tore the night open. Caleb dropped to one knee, the bullet whistling over his shoulder. In the same motion, his rifle barked, and Jonas staggered, clutching his side. But Jonas was stubborn, fueled by hate. He roared, stumbling forward, pistol still raised. Miriam's scream cut the storm as he leveled it at Caleb's chest. Without thought, she burst from the doorway, slamming into Jonas with all her weight. The pistol cracked skyward, the bullet lost to the rain. Jonas cursed, shoving her down into the mud. His boot pressed to her throat. "I'll kill her right in front of you," he spat. Caleb's rifle clicked empty. For the first time, silence from his weapon. Jonas grinned through his pain, ready to squeeze the trigger again. But Caleb didn't hesitate. He lunged like a bear, hands locking around Jonas's wrist. With brutal strength, he twisted, bones snapping under his grip. Jonas screamed, the pistol falling. Caleb's fist crashed against his jaw, sending him sprawling into the mud. For a breath, the storm hushed. Jonas lay gasping, rain and blood mixing at his lips. Caleb stood over him, chest heaving, rifle useless, but his will unbroken. Jonas's eyes flicked to Miriam. "You'll always be nothing," he hissed. But Caleb looked down, voice steady as stone. "She's my wife, and she'll never be nothing again." His boot pressed Jonas into the earth, ending the fight the way the West always ended such men, swift, merciless, final. When dawn broke, the storm was gone. Smoke curled from the cabin, pine branches lay strewn across the clearing, and silence reclaimed the mountains. Caleb worked with quiet hands, repairing what the fight had broken. Beside him, Miriam moved too, setting bread, sweeping mud, humming soft under her breath. The cabin wasn't just logs and nails anymore. It was a vow, sealed in blood and storm. And though no preacher had spoken it, no papers signed it, Caleb had given her a name, wife. The West would forget her family's cruelty. The West would forget Jonas and his men, but it would not forget the cabin where a mountain man and a cast-off girl carved a life together. Proof that even in the loneliest wilderness, love could strike like lightning. If Miriam's courage stirred something inside you, don't just leave this story behind. Like this tale, subscribe and ring the bell, because out here in the Wild West, love may be scarcer than water, but it always finds a way.